Hello, and thank you for being here. I'm Dr. Madhavi, a Pediatrician and Newborn Specialist from Hyderabad, and this is Kavach. Today, I want to talk about something that is both fundamental and easy to overlook: how vision and hearing in early childhood shape the entire course of development. We often think of childhood milestones in terms of walking, talking, reading, or social skills. But underneath all of these milestones are two silent systems doing enormous work every single day, that is, the eyes and the ears. As a pediatrician, one of the most common things I hear from parents is, "My child seems fine, but how do I know everything is really okay?" That question is exactly the right place to begin, because when it comes to vision and hearing, children often appear fine until much later when we realize something important was missed. So, I want to talk to you not as someone trying to worry you, but as a doctor whose job is to protect children's development early, when we can make the biggest difference. First, let me explain why early childhood is a window of opportunity. From birth through the early years of life, the brain is developing at an astonishing pace. During this time, the brain is not just growing, it is wiring itself based on experience. Neuroscience tells us that there are critical or sensitive periods in early childhood when sensory input helps organize the brain's networks. Vision and hearing are especially important during this time. This does not mean that development stops after early childhood. The brain remains plastic throughout life, meaning it can reorganize itself, form new neural connections, and adapt to new experiences. But early experiences matter more, and interventions are most effective when they happen early. Now, let me tell you why vision matters more than we think. Vision is not just about seeing clearly. It affects hand-eye coordination, balance and posture, reading readiness, attention and learning, social interaction. When a child has a visual problem such as significant refractive error or astigmatism, the issue isn't only that images are blurry. The bigger issue is that the brain is learning from imperfect input. If the brain consistently receives unclear images during early development, it may never fully learn how to process sharp visual information, even if the eyes themselves are later corrected. This is why early correction matters. For example, glasses don't just improve eyesight. In young children, they teach the brain what clear vision looks like. The earlier this happens, the more effectively the brain adapts. But please don't rest easy, thinking you can act when your child complains. One of the most important and most misunderstood point is this: young children rarely say they can't see or hear well, not because they are hiding something, but because they do not know. A child who has always seen the world blurry assumes that is how the world looks like. A child who hears muffled sounds doesn't know that speech is supposed to be clearer. Children lack a reference point for normal. To complicate things further, their brains quietly adjust. For example, if one eye provides slightly weaker or inconsistent information, the brain may rely more on the stronger eye, reduce input from the weaker eye, simplify what it focuses on, and etc. This adaptation is actually a massive strength, but to a parent, things can look completely normal. All of this means we cannot rely on children to tell us when something is wrong. So, detection depends on observation, screening, and most important, follow-up. Now, let's talk about hearing. It is the gateway to communication and language, isn't it? Long before children speak a single word, they are listening, discriminating sounds, learning rhythm and tone, recognizing patterns, mapping sounds to meaning, and so on. This process begins in infancy, not when speech emerges. Language development depends on hearing in three ways, and we must all know that. 1. Physiological readiness. The brain's language centers are activated by sound. Second is contextual learning, that is, understanding meaning through repeated exposure. And the third is motor preparation, that is, learning how sounds are produced before trying to reproduce them. If hearing is impaired during this critical period, all three processes are disrupted. Even mild or fluctuating hear loss, such as from chronic ear infections, can affect speech clarity, vocabulary, and learning. But what happens when correction comes late? Modern medicine can do remarkable things. Hearing aids, cochlear implants, glasses, and therapies, all these can restore sensory input. But timing matters. If sensory input is missing or distorted for too long during early development, later correction may not fully reverse the effects. Children may speak later, struggle with language complexity, have subtle learning or social challenges. This does not mean children cannot thrive. Many do, but it often means extra support is needed, and outcomes may not match those of children who received early intervention. So, what is the takeaway for parents and caregivers? Not fear, not hypervigilance. The goal is informed attention, not constant worry. Awareness helps children, anxiety does not. So, allow me to tell you 4 things to prioritize instead. First, do not assume your child will grow out of it. This is one of the most common and understandable assumptions parents make. Sometimes children do catch up, but sometimes they adapt instead of improving, and adaptation can mask a problem. Children are remarkably good at compensating, sitting closer, watching other children, avoiding visually demanding tasks, relying on context rather than hearing clearly, and compensation hides problems, whereas screening reveals them. Screening reveals problems. Second, let me tell you what you can gently observe without testing or worrying. Patterns to look for while observing vision are sitting very close to books or craft work, rubbing their eyes often, especially while focusing, tilting their head or close one eye while concentrating, avoiding puzzles, coloring or fine detail play, seeming confident with movement but hesitant with close work. And patterns to look for while observing hearing are responding well when you are close but less from a distance, asking what more often than expected, doing better in quiet settings than noisy ones, turning the TV volume up higher than others prefer, having speech clarity that varies depending on the environment. The third is follow through on screening and referrals, especially at this age. Ages 2 to 5 are when many children enter daycare or preschool, and they are exposed to group environments, so they face higher sensory and language demands. If a screening result is borderline or inconclusive, or it says probably fine but recheck, then please recheck. This is not about panic, it is all about timing. Then the fourth is trust your instincts and speak up early. Let me say this clearly as a pediatrician. If you're worried, that matters. You do not need proof or a diagnosis or a dramatic symptom. You only need a valid concern based on patterns you have observed. I would always rather evaluate a child early and say, everything looks fine with this child, there's nothing to worry, than see a child later and say, this would have been easier to address earlier. In closing, let me summarize. Vision and hearing are not just senses. They are pathways into learning, communication, and connection. The 2 to 5 year age range is a bridge. The brain is still flexible. The demands of learning are increasing. Small sensory gaps become more visible. Your role is not to diagnose. Your role is to observe, follow through, and of course advocate. When parents and pediatricians work together during this window, outcomes are better and support is often simpler. Early attention doesn't guarantee perfection, but it maximizes potential, and that is one of the most powerful gifts we can give a child.